is a springtime rain, to have a friend right in your corner. Your heart will feel a little warmer. Tender loving care, tender loving care. Each warm and friendly touch lets someone know you care so much. Tender loving care, tender loving care.
Good evening, I'm Dr. Greenbrier Almond, and thank you for joining us on our program, Tender Loving Care. Each week, actually over the last 36 years or so, we've been talking about this interface between Christianity and medicine. And part of the thrill of this has been that the interface is so true, that there's a healing that happens in us, body, mind, and spirit, that when we become aware of it, we become aware of God's providence, God's guidance in our life. And I've come to the point that my father was, when he was elderly, he was retiring from his medical practice, he said, it's time to write my memoirs. And he wrote a classic book, Stories of a West Virginia Doctor. And so I've followed Dad's lead now, as I've been a doctor for 40 years, beginning to write my memoirs and tell stories. And this is for the sake of the next generation. I know I'm very glad that Dad told his stories, because people don't have doctors who make house calls anymore. I actually had a call this week, a man saying, do you know a doctor? He's asking me who would make a house call. And I'm retired, I don't have the malpractice insurance, I don't have the setup to do that, which I regret, but it's very complex to do these things, and unless you're doing it full throttle all the time. But in any way, Dad did make house calls. He did home deliveries. He saw a lot of things that seemed very primitive and almost impossible now. And Dad was a good storyteller besides, but he didn't over-elaborate these. These are just experiences of his that he wrote in his memoir. And very grateful that Dad did that. And I would encourage other people, as you have a full life, whether yours has been a teacher, a minister, an engineer, college professor, whatever you may be in life, Indian chief, cook, bottle washer, anything, you know, it's important to write down some of your stories. Your family will really appreciate this, and if you don't save them, they'll be gone. I also believe that even if we're younger, we have a story to tell. We could begin to tell our story every day, whether we write it as a diary or a column in a newspaper, or however you want to do this. I know people go online now and make YouTube and things like that. So there's different ways that people can do this. Well, in any event, the fourth book that I've been working on is coming out now. These will be 80 stories that I wrote over the last year, and include stories that I wrote as I was in the Philippines last year for 50 days. And it's a wonderful country. My wife and I have been married 40 years this year, and we've been going back and forth to the Philippines for about 35 years. So there's a long history of discovering how wonderful the Philippines is. And so here are some stories which have a Philippine slant to them. Rastly and I, as I point out in this story, Rastly has been trying to slow me down for about 39 years. I'm probably a typical American, always wanting to be busy, always involved in something. And yet there is wisdom in slowing down our life, smelling the roses, as the saying is in America, and just appreciating things that happen to us. I've discovered this by visiting the Philippines, that indeed a slower life can be very, very rich, and have things that we don't appreciate when we go too fast. For example, coming home to Rastly, I've learned that the storms the nature of the weather affects people and slows them down. For example, storm clouds rising have rough waters, and depends. They have like 3 levels of this, but depends on how severe the storm is. People will just not go out in boats, not go from island to island. Everything stops. Everyone stays home, and we probably should think about that too. As you follow the news, you're probably aware that there was a airplane crash in Indonesia, and appears to be weather related. Not uncommon that you'll hear, as in the wintertime here in West Virginia, there will be weather-related storms. We probably need to be more cautious about this. Let the weather slow us down some. In the Philippines, they have basically 2 seasons, summer and spring. And so they don't have a time without leaves, and they don't have a time when they cannot harvest. They can harvest 3 or 4 times a year. For example, rice harvest, or mangoes, or bananas, and so it's an interesting concept, but there's no shock of the winters like we have here. Of course, that means the insects and other things grow and live and thrive, and so there's more of that than we have here than in America. I always thought that the reason for the winter here was to get rid of the mosquitoes, and I'm sure that's not the whole reason, but I'm grateful that we don't have as many mosquitoes because we have a cold winter. Fruits and vegetables ripen in the sun in the Philippines. A lot of what we do, our food comes from great distance. Maybe half of all the food comes from Central Valley of California, and so it's picked before it's ripened, and it doesn't taste as well. But you learn to celebrate food if you can go out in the garden and pick it yourself. There's a lot more we can do in West Virginia, and we should be all having our apple trees and our fruit trees and our gardens, and we can raise a lot of food ourselves. Nap time is back. About 80% of the world's population takes siesta, and of course most people live in the world in the tropics. And actually, if you draw a circle around the Philippines, and include China and India, but that area of the world, that area of Southeast Asia, 1/2 of the 7 billion people on Earth live within that small circle. Philippines has 100 million people. Of course, China has over 1 billion. India has over 1 billion. So we have over half the population of the world in the tropics in Southeast Asia. And definitely nap time is in. It gets very hot, and you just don't want to move if it's 90 to 100 degrees and humid, and a nap is good. And then you can stay up at night and do other things after the sun sets or early in the morning when it's cooler. We have setting a spell. People just set a spell in Appalachia. We have wonderful porches, especially the older houses, and I've learned to like that. That if we're out on our porch here on Canoa Street in Buchanan, then we're open for visitors, and people can come and just set a spell and talk. But they do a lot more of that in the Philippines. Walking, of course, is a wonderful way to experience life. More and more people are recognizing this. Doctors have been talking about this at least all of my 40 years of practice, that, for example, if you have a back pain, you should walk 3 miles a day. If you have a heart condition, you should walk 3 miles a day. If you're trying to lose weight, walk 3 miles a day. You see the pattern. We're all to take 10,000 steps a day for our health. So walking from here to there is a great thing. And then people who even if they have to drive to shop, there's an advantage to parking way at the far end of the shopping mall parking lot, so that you can walk to the store, trying to get your 10,000 steps in every day. But in the Philippines, walking is a way of life. There are no cars readily available. There's public transportation buses, but they're not as efficient as they are here, and so walking is a great way to get from one place to another. So what's the hurry? I have a story about that, and so that people will understand a little bit about the Philippines that way. One of the early times when we went to the Philippines, Ashley's sister was still alive, Jesusa, and she wanted us to have a true Philippine experience. That is to ride a jeepney, and then ride a bus, and then ride a ferry boat, and go through all the transportation modes that a Filipino does. And I'm very appreciative that she allowed us to have that experience. And so I write about that. I call it the worst of times, the best of times. Sort of take off on Charles Dickens. But here we are in Manila, which is probably the largest city in the world. It's, it's hard to measure a city after it's 25 million or 30 million people, but it's certainly a huge, huge, huge city. And the main public transportation is what's called a jeepney. It's a World War II Jeep that has been elongated. The engine is still there from World War II, and the frame, it looks very much like a Jeep, but then they've make it as long as a truck, and fill it up with people that can carry quite a load there. And so here we are with our two children, Maria and Rance, as small children, and then Aracely, Jesusa, and myself. And we each have our 50-pound cardboard box of stuff. So we have like about eight boxes of things that we're taking from Manila down to the island. And you have porters who will help you carry things like this, but you do a lot of carrying yourself. So it starts well. We have a great time down through through Manila, though I find out the traffic goes very slow. You have monumental traffic jams. Filipinos don't really have the same traffic laws that we have. Even if you have painted lanes, which they don't always have painted lanes, you will still have, if it's 4 lanes in one direction, then there'll be 8 lanes going that direction. So the people crowd themselves together, and you can get snarled up in traffic for hours. I remember one time I was on a bus going from one point to another, and there was a movie, I think it was an hour-and-a-half long movie, and I got to see the whole movie just sitting on the bus waiting to go from one point to another. But you cannot be in a hurry. Anyway, we have our jeepney ride, and then we get down to the bus station. We get on a bus, and we're going down to Batangas from Manila. This is like going from Buchanan to Charleston, and we go by bus, and we're making great time. But then there's black smoke and grinding sound, and we know something's wrong with our engine. So our bus is having some major mechanical problems, and it pulls off the road. Everyone has to get off. And so here we are stacked up with all of our stuff at the edge of the road on a super highway. And we have too much stuff, really, for a simple bus to come along. Each bus might have 1 or 2 empty seats, but we have 3 adults and 2 children and a mountain of stuff. So we're really stuck. But we begin to pray. And the Gannons are very much a praying people. My wife's a praying person, and I am too. But we pray earnestly for something to happen, a miracle. And lo and behold, there's a lumber truck coming down the road, and right in front of us, it blows the tire. And it has to pull off right beside us. Well, they have a spare, and Jesusa goes over and says, can we just get on the back of your lumber truck? We can't get on a bus, and we have to get to the dock by 10 o'clock. We're going to take an all-night ferry to an island in the middle of the Pacific, so we need to get there. And so they consider us, and they take pity on us, and so we ride this lumber truck down a super highway. Again, I don't recommend this as an American safety measure at all, but it got us to the port, and we got there at the right time. So it's somewhat of a miracle that we did that. Then as we're going down through the ferry at night, it's quite an experience too. At the upper level, you'll have people sleeping on the deck and cots, and then down below you'll have animals like chickens and pigs and all sorts of animals. So it's a true native experience to ride a ferry boat through the night, and it was about from 10 o'clock in the morning to about 4 o'clock in the morning before we got to Tablas Island. But finally we arrived, and then we took little tricycles. These are motorcycles with a sidebar, and that's what people ride on my wife's island from one point to another. And you can actually pack a lot of people and a lot of stuff in a little tricycle. So we experienced all forms of transportation getting from one point to another, including a bus breakdown. A lot of stories in the Philippines will center around transportation because it is quite primitive, and you remember the stuff that's unusual, especially to an American. I've always heard, my parents have taught us, red in the morning, sailors take warning, red at night, sailors delight, as a way to look at the skies and tell what kind of weather we're going to have the next day. Of course, now we Google Upshur County weather, or we can go to the Weather Channel and catch weather almost any time in America. Maybe it's made us a little lazy to look at the skies, but in any event, I have a story about traveling when we knew better, when we had a red sky in the morning. We should have taken warning, but we didn't. And so here we are traveling from one island to another. We're starting off with my wife's island at Tablas, and 4 o'clock in the morning again, because you want to travel at night because it's so hot, maybe 100 degrees and just boiling almost at noon. So you don't want to travel in the hot sun. So we get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and are traveling, and we could see as the sun came up as we were passing by her island that the sky is very red. And the captain's a little worried. I'm up in the captain's loft watching things happen. Very fascinating to be out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. We saw dolphins following us. We saw whales, all sorts of things like this that you don't see in America, but I'm very grateful for that experience. But the storm came, and here we are with a boat, and it has two outrigger sides, big bamboo pieces that balance the boat. And lo and behold, the bamboo breaks. So we're in danger of flipping over. And not only that, but up in the pilot's loft, there's a glass separating us just to keep the storm away from us. But we hit the water hard, and it's not safety glass. It just breaks, and it's like missiles. And our captain is cut badly, so we have to have a tourniquet for his leg. So also all these experiences, you wonder, and of course there's no helicopters flying to rescue us, but they finally lash back spare bamboo, and the storm continues, and we make it to this port, and we stay with his family overnight. And how close we were to death. The family is traveling back to my wife's island the next day, and lo and behold, the storm continues, but they travel in face of the storm, and the boat does capsize, and it doesn't come back to land for 5 days, and no one is found. So 25 people or so died. And also, another time, a oil freighter from Saudi Arabia is bringing oil to Manila. It's coming through Tablas Strait, and it hits one of these ferries that we're riding all night, and it loses at least 1,000 registered passengers. But often in the Philippines, unregistered people are on a ship like this, a ferry. So it might have had 4,000 people or 3,000 people. No one knows really. But the boat goes down, and the oil freighter continues on through the night with his load of oil. So it's tragic things happen, and I write about that, and the story entitled "Red in the Morning." So I think I would heed warnings more, and I want my grandchildren to heed warnings of weather and things like that also. I have some good times too. These are not all bad stories or scary stories. An experience we don't know in America, but we should discover. It's called Halo Halo. Ice cream is good. I like ice cream, but the fruits of the Philippines are very good. Most of them are like our strawberry. They ripen. You have to eat them fresh, and they don't preserve well. They don't ship well. So we really don't have these fruits available to us here in America to eat. And maybe if we're in Florida, maybe Southern California, places like that. But there's a particular treat, a fruit treat called halo halo. It means mix mix in their language, in Tagalog language, and it's fruit like jackfruit, plantain, banana, ubi, buko, macapuno, forms of coconut. And it has all sorts of red beans, green beans, all sorts of fruits like that. And it has a lot of egg yolk and sugar and things like this. But it's a wonderful dish. And as I thought about writing about this and describing it, so people would be interested in it, I was reminded, I think I saw this on the news, that both the second President Bush and now our current President Obama has a Filipino chef in the White House. So this man is a very, very good chef. He's served 2 presidents, Republican and Democrat. So his cooking is superb. And I'm sure the president, especially President Obama, probably knows a lot about halo halo because there is a shaved ice treat that he loves from his days growing up in Hawaii, and very much like the Filipino halo halo. But if you get a chance to try that, you'll love it. You'll enjoy that. Halo halo. Another story I'd like to tell, and I've written out for the grandchildren, is about the big arm of the Philippines. The Philippines is 7,200 islands, and it has a huge peninsula, a big jutting out island called Palawan. But Palawan is the main island, but there's 1,700 islands around Palawan. Each island represents the top of a mountain, a volcanic mountain. And off the coast of Palawan is the deepest part of the ocean, of the Pacific Ocean, deepest ocean on Earth. So a fascinating part of the world to go to. And we visited there last year, and we went into a subterranean river that flows from the heart of Palawan Island. It's underground for several miles, and then it opens out into the ocean. And it was discovered by Americans in 1931. The Filipino did not go back up in there because they were afraid, as anyone might be, because it's very dark. You don't know if there's going to be some animal that's never been discovered, some sea creature or dragon or something like that, that could live back in a subterranean river flowing out from the heart of an island. You don't know, of course, about navigation there with lights and so forth. But anyway, some Americans from the University of Michigan were the first to discover this subterranean river. It's now become a national park, and so people like myself can go in there, though it's primitive by American standard to travel. We got into a little rowboat, little motorboat about 20 feet long, and has a little small motor on the back, and our light was just we had a battery, and then we had 2 wires up to a light, and that's our light. And they let me sit up front and guide the light here and there to see things, and so we had all sorts of stalactites and stalagmites that had been identified. But we traveled up into the middle of this island several miles. Fascinating. The other thing about Palawan, if you get a chance to go there, is that some of the best pearls in the world are there. So people who like jewelry and maybe to women who doesn't like jewelry, you can get native pearls that are quite good, first class. Favorite story of mine is as we travel to other countries, you learn their culture, and one of them is the siesta, taking a nap in the middle of the day. About 80% of the world does this, and we probably all ought to benefit from it. There's about 2 times a day, if a person has a sleep disorder, as a doctor I make that diagnosis sometimes, the best time to sleep is 1 o'clock in the morning and 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And of course, the siesta is usually after lunch, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. People sleep for several hours. And but as I was thinking about the custom, I wrote a little story I just called the yawn, and it goes back to my days growing up with Popeye the Sailor Man, and he had Popeye had a friend named Wimpy, and Wimpy could not only get free hamburgers, but he got paid for testing mattresses, sleeping on a mattress, and so it was a fascinating character, Wimpy. What a life pursuit to do that. But I thought about this in terms of how powerful the yawn is. If you're with a Filipino and you just had a nice meal, you had your halo-halo after you've eaten a full meal with a lot of soups, things like that, that they love the soup because it adds liquid back and it's very hot. But you have your halo-halo, then you're ready for a nap. And someone yawns, it's almost like you can't resist lying down after you yawn. And so I imagine doing physiological testing, medical experimentation on the power of the yawn. And I suggest in my little story that I would be a happy volunteer to do that. Well, these are just samplings. I'm telling bits and pieces of stories. Some 80 stories we put together for this new book, probably be titled More Stories of a West Virginia Doctor for His Grandchildren. And the other books have done very well. I mean, people are buying them out of interest. I'm anticipating that this one will be of great interest, especially to Filipinos, because my wife will have some 20 stories. And of course, who knows how Asia, the word of mouth and how things happen, but 3 billion people live in Southeast Asia. These are customs that we don't know about as Americans in Appalachia, but we should be interested in because they're the customs of the people of a good portion of how the world lives. And of course, likewise, Filipinos and Chinese and Indians and so forth are wanting to know how Americans live. And so for the flip side, these stories I think will be of general interest. But most of all, as I say, for the grandchildren. Well, until the next time, this is Dr. Greenbrier Almond thanking you for joining us on our program, Tender Loving Care. Special thanks to Channel 3 for this opportunity to come your way each week. Look forward to talking about other issues of tender loving care with you in the future. Take care.
Stories of a West Virginia Doctor, written by Dr. Harold D. Allman. A collection of 55 short stories about his experience as a small-town doctor in central West Virginia. And Tender Loving Care. Stories from a West Virginia Doctor, Volume 2, written by Dr. Greenbrier Allman, using videotapes to write 70 additional stories of his father's very colorful life as a small-town doctor. They can be found for purchase at Amazon.com and most local bookstores. Tune into Channel 3 Buckhannon for Tender Loving Care with Dr. Greenbrier Allman, where he talks about the connection between Christianity and medicine.